The crashed supply shuttle hissed steam into the violet atmosphere of Dracor Prime as Jonah Merrick dragged himself from the wreckage. Blood trickled down his temple, and his left arm hung at an awkward angle. The distress beacon was fried, the comm system dead. He was alone on a planet classified as avoid at all costs in the Colonial Fleet database. Dragons. The entire planet was ruled by dragons. Jonah stumbled toward a grove of crystalline trees, their branches chiming softly in the alien wind. He needed shelter, water, and time to think. But the sound that stopped him wasn't the wind or the distant rumble of volcanic vents. It was crying, high-pitched, keening, desperate. He found her behind a fallen boulder, no bigger than a house cat. Her scales shimmered between copper and gold, and one delicate wing hung at an unnatural angle, the translucent membrane torn and bleeding. The dragon baby, barely a hatchling, looked up at him with eyes like molten amber, filled with pain and terror. Every instinct screamed at Jonah to run. Dragons were apex predators, intelligent and merciless. Where there was a baby, parents couldn't be far. But those eyes held him frozen, and somewhere in his battered, oxygen-deprived brain, a different instinct kicked in. The medic instinct. Easy, easy, Jonah whispered, dropping to his knees. He'd treated everything from plasma burns to vacuum exposure during his 3 years with the Colonial Medical Corps. A broken wing couldn't be that different from a broken limb, could it? The hatchling hissed, smoke curling from her nostrils, but didn't pull away as Jonah slowly opened his emergency med kit. His hands moved with practiced efficiency. Antiseptic spray, synthetic flesh patches, microsutures from his portable kit. The wing membrane was delicate, almost paper-thin, but he worked carefully, aligning the tear and sealing it with surgical precision. "There you go, little one," he murmured, fashioning a splint from salvaged shuttle debris and wrapping it with sterile bandages. "That should hold until it heals." The hatchling Sarala, he would later learn she was called, tilted her head and made a sound like wind chimes. Then, she licked his hand with a tongue that felt like warm sandpaper and took flight, wobbling but airborne, disappearing into the crimson sky. Jonah allowed himself exactly 30 seconds of relief before reality crashed back. He was still stranded, still injured, still probably going to die on this planet. He made it another 100 meters before he heard them. The rustling, the chittering, the sound of dozens of wings. Jonah turned and his heart stopped. Dragons, hatchlings, juveniles, even a few young adults. They emerged from between the crystal trees, from behind rocks, from the very air itself, dozens of them, and every single one was injured. A blue-scaled juvenile with a gash across its shoulder, a pair of hatchlings with burned claws, a teenage dragon with what looked like an infected bite wound on its haunch. They approached slowly, cautiously, forming a line that stretched back into the forest. At the front of the line, Sarala chirped and gestured with her bandaged wing. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Jonah breathed. But he wasn't kidding himself. He knew what he was looking at. In his years as a field medic, he'd seen it before that moment, when word spread through a refugee camp or a disaster zone that someone was helping. That there was hope. The dragons had no healers, no medics. They were powerful, yes, but their society was built on strength and fire, not medicine. They let their wounded recover naturally or not at all. Until now. Jonah looked at his medkit. It was designed for a single human, for a week-long mission. He had maybe enough supplies for 5 more patients. 10 if he stretched it. There were at least 40 dragons in line. The human sat down heavily on a rock and started laughing. It was insane. It was impossible. It was the most human thing he'd ever done. "All right," he said to the assembled dragons. "Form an orderly queue. Let's triage this mess." For 3 days, Jonah worked without stopping. He treated burns with cooling gel meant for radiation exposure. He set broken bones with splints made from shuttle debris. He cleaned wounds with antiseptic and prayer. When his supplies ran out, he improvised using local plants that seemed analogous to Earth flora. testing them on himself first before applying them to his patients. The dragons watched him with growing fascination. They brought him food, strange fruits, and roasted meat that he probably shouldn't eat but did anyway. They brought him water from crystal-clear springs. They brought him more injured. On the fourth day, the adults arrived. Jonah looked up from bandaging a juvenile's tail to find himself surrounded by dragons the size of shuttles. Their scales gleamed like armor. Their eyes burned with intelligence and suspicion. At their head was a massive female whose copper-gold scales marked her as Sarala's mother. This was it. This was where he died. The great dragon lowered her head until her eye was level with Jonah's entire body. She could swallow him whole without even chewing. Instead, she made a sound deep, resonant, like a mountain singing. Then she bowed. One by one, the adult dragons bowed. To him, to a human. Sarala landed on Jonah's shoulder, her wing fully healed, and chirped proudly. 6 months later, when the rescue ship finally located Jonah Merrick's beacon, they found something unprecedented. A human settlement, crude but functional, built in the heart of dragon territory, and in the center of it, a medical facility where the most feared predators in the galaxy waited patiently in line. The rescue team's captain stared in disbelief. "How?" she asked Jonah. "How did you survive? How did you make peace with them?" Jonah looked at Sarala, now nearly full-grown, who had appointed herself his permanent guardian. He thought about the hundreds of dragons he'd treated, the trust he'd built one bandage at a time. "I just did what humans do," he said simply. "I helped." The galaxy had always feared dragons. They had never thought to heal them. It took a human stranded, injured, and impossibly stubborn to show an entire species what compassion looked like, and in doing so, Jonah Merrick didn't just survive. He created the first true alliance between humanity and dragonkind, all because he couldn't walk past someone in pain, even if that someone had wings and breathed fire.